Hello people, so welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I am Freddie. So this is the Sluggish Reader, or just Sluggish Reader. I'm not sure if there's an article in front of it. No, there's none. But anyway, this in my channel I talk about books, and in this video, my December 2021 wrap up, I'll be talking about all of the books that I finished in the month of December 2021. And I must say my December was a wonderful reading month. I finished 5 books. And it's especially wonderful because one of those books is like a really big book. So that's really exciting. Before I start, I think out of these 5 books, 3 of them are translated fiction. I also finished one short story collection, one science fiction novel. I think I have one sort of political spy thriller novel, one murder mystery thriller kind of a novel, and also one sort of like a family drama. So I am going to start with the first book that I finished in December, and that was Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout. So Olive Kitteridge is actually one of the books that I've always been wanting to read in 2021, but I only managed to finish it in December. So Olive Kitteridge is kind of like a collection of 13 short stories that are interrelated to one another, but all of these stories, they have one thing in common, that is they all feature an appearance by this character called Olive Kitteridge. Now, all of these stories, they sort of revolves around the people who are from this small fictional town in the US called Crosby in Maine, and all of these stories, they are about different things because they all have different protagonists. In some of these stories, Olive Kitteridge herself is the protagonist. Meanwhile, in some others, it features some of the people dealing with their own lives and their own struggles, completely unrelated to Olive Kitteridge. But nonetheless, their stories would somehow involve an appearance by Olive Kitteridge, whether it's a really tiny cameo or whether, or Olive Kitteridge just sort of appears in one of the flashbacks. So, who is Olive Kitteridge? I can't really say what is this book about. I think this book, the best question to ask is, who is Olive Kitteridge? So from what we read about Olive in these stories is that we know that she is a retired school teacher who lives in this small town. She has a husband and her son, and she is sort of dealing with depression. She is really cranky. She says mean things, and she is quite unabashed when saying that. She is really honest and direct. She's not the kind of person who beats around the bush. Like, she just says whatever she wants to say. At the same time, she is also very perceptive, and as a result, different people would see Olive in different light. Some people think that she is really mean and cranky and is just like not a cool person to be around with. Some of the people, on the other hand, they would think that Olive Kitteridge is the kindest person that they have ever met. Olive Kitteridge is the kind of person that have helped them in some capacity or another and changed their lives. And from the perspective of the reader, I think it's really cool to read this book and sort of gathers like little tiny pieces of Olive Kitteridge and fits them, combines them into one single personality, one single person. And I think it's really fun to read this book. You don't have to read it, in order. All of these stories, they are able to stand alone, so you can actually read the stories in any order that you want, and you will still be able to receive that kind of Olive Kitteridge experience. And I think it really shows, because I've heard that Elizabeth Strout is someone who writes with a large focus on characters, and it really shows in this book, because all of the stories in this book, they just revolves around the characters. They don't really care so much about the plot. It's always about the characters and what they learn, and the kinds of developments that they have, their fears and motivations. So this book is a really wonderful book to read if you are really into character-driven stories. And also, one thing that I would like to highlight is that this book is, because it deals so much with characters and their inner turmoils, it deals a lot with issues of mental health as well. So many different facets of mental health is being explored in here. We have anxiety, depression, suicide, eating disorders, all sorts of things. So it's also quite fascinating in that way. I actually have a single book review for this one, so if you are interested in that, I have the link in the description box below. So yeah, this is Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout. Wonderful, wonderful book. One of my most memorable books of 2021, by the way. I loved it so much. So the next one that I finished was a buddy read with Marilyn Maya Mendoza, and this is called Alberta and Jacob by Cora Sandel. So this book was originally written in Norwegian, and it was translated into English by Elizabeth Rokkan. And this book was published sometime in the 1929, I think. So it's a very old book. And yeah, I think the translation was published sometime in the 50s, if I'm not mistaken, I think. Anyway, this book is a wonderful family fiction slash domestic fiction. Well, those two things are kind of the same. Family fiction slash coming of age fiction, and it features this character called Alberta, who lives in a small, kind of isolated town somewhere in northern of Norway, very close to the Arctic Circle, and it actually starts in the winter. The story starts in the winter where it is quite cold, and Alberta is living in this kind of an unhappy family. Her parents are kind of unhappy, and the only person that she finds solace in that family is her brother named Jacob. And also, this story takes place sometime in the early 20th century, and around that time, young women like Alberta, they are sort of subjected to this expectation that the only thing that the safest thing that they can aspire to is to make themselves more presentable and ladylike, so that they can secure a good marriage in order to be able to secure a good future for themselves. And Alberta's mom has been really insistent on her being a particular way, just being pretty, just take care of herself, take care of her physical appearance, take care of her public behavior, so that she can get a good man to marry. But Alberta herself, she is quite rebellious in a very quiet way. She's rebellious in a quiet way because she has issues with her self-esteem. She does not think that she is pretty or smart or outgoing enough. She thinks that she's not good enough. So she is quite, she has this really low level of confidence. But at the same time, she really wants to rebel, and she really wants to break free of her unhappy home life, and also her isolated small town. She wants to go somewhere where it is much warmer. I really like the way that this book really explores the psychology of this young woman who really wants something, but she does not know how she wants to get it. And she also realizes that as a young woman at that time, she does not have much options. And it is kind of interesting to, to root for this character, knowing that she has everything stacked against her. And, you just sort of follows her internal monologues and her internal conflicts in terms of what she wants to do next. And every time when she achieves really small successes, like being able to speak up for herself, you cheer for her. And I really like that reading experience. It was this book is a really quiet book, but at the same time it is also very reflective. And I think if you are looking for a book that is very much a character study of one particular character who is very insecure, this is a wonderful book to try. Now, this book is actually part of a trilogy called the Alberta trilogy, I think, and there is a sequel called Alberta and Freedom, and I think after that, Alberta Alone. But then again, I'm really excited to read those books, but then again, I find that it's quite difficult to get those books here in Malaysia, and even if there are kind of like places where I could order online, I would have to spend so much money just on the book itself and also the shipping. So yeah, this book is not very widely published. I wish more people know about this book, so maybe then publishers will publish this book more. It's a really wonderful book. It deserves to be sort of like a famous classic, even among people these days. So yeah, this is a really wonderful book. Check it out if you have the opportunity. And I'm going to move on to the next one. The third book that I finished in December is also a wonderful, wonderful book. So this is Dune by Frank Herbert. So I have this mass market paperback copy, which is kind of thick. And but of course, me being sluggish reader, I am really intimidated by the length of this book. Just look at this. But I was able to enjoy this book very much. This is probably one of the most, also another one of the most memorable books that I have in 2021. And I think the strength of this book is definitely the voice of the narrator, the voice of the story. So this book is a science fiction novel, and it is about this planet called Arrakis. So the story takes place far, far, far in the future, and we have this planet called Arrakis, in which there's this substance called spice that everyone covets. So in that society, we actually have different planets being ruled by different houses, and the society is sort of feudalistic in a way. And the planet called Arrakis is actually being ruled by outside forces, and so the inhabitants of Arrakis, called the Fremens, have always been subjected to exploitation and also violence from outside powers who want to sort of control the production of this spice from Arrakis. Now, spice is really precious because it sort of helps with interstellar travels. It is also a psychedelic drug that so many people want. It also apparently has health benefits such as prolonging lifespan. So obviously it has so much great things about it that so many people want this thing. I mean, does that remind you of anything in real life? Anyway, at the same time, Arrakis is also a very desert kind of environment. It is very harsh, and so the Fremens, the inhabitants who live there, they the life is so difficult because apparently water is also very scarce in that planet. So one day, the emperor who sort of rules all of these planets, he wants one of the houses called House Atreides to rule Arrakis in order to control the production of spice. And House Atreides would have to produce, the amount of spice, sort of like same amount as the ones that have been produced before, so that they can continue holding this planet, this Arrakis planet. And but the emperor does that because he has some kind of, there is a ruse behind it. He sort of wants to destroy House Atreides, and he actually succeeds in doing so, even though House Atreides knows that there is some kind of trap upon their stewardship of Arrakis. Now, the scion of House Atreides, called Paul, he survives the destruction of his house, and he is mad. He and his mom survives, and he sort of joins the natives of Arrakis. He joins the Fremen in order to exact revenge on the emperor over the destruction of his house. And the Fremens are all very, more than happy to join him, because they are also mad after all those years of being exploited by outside powers who just pretty much bully them because of the spice in their planet. And they are also kind of unhappy people because water is so little in their planet. So, their lives have been so difficult. This book, I think, will always be relevant in our current world, because this book talks a lot about issues such as environmentalism, like how people should take care of their environment and respect it, and also how people should sort of know how to kind of use the resources from the environment in a more sustainable way. Like, you can't just take anything and expect everything to be all great and wonderful, right? And at the same time, it also intersects with a discussion of colonization and exploitation of the natives, especially exploitation of indigenous people, and how the extraction of resources not only screws over the planet and the environment, but also screws over the people who live close to the source of the close to the resource. So, those things still happen in today's world. This book illustrates that in this really wonderful, fantastic way. And also, because this book is a really thick book, one thing that got me through it, and it really helped me, was the voice. I think that this book is really campy. In that, not in a drag queen kind of a campy way, but it is really over the top. I think that this book feels so much, the way I visualize the plot in this book is it resembles a Mexican soap opera, or Asian soap opera for that matter. It is fast-paced because of its action and all of the schemings and the plots of each of those many of the characters in here. But at the same time, the plot occasionally also slows down because we are being treated with the internal monologues of the characters. That happens a lot. So it sort of caused this novel to feel very over the top and very dramatic. And somehow I just love that. I love that so much. So if you are interested in reading this book, just and you feel intimidated by its length, just know that Sluggish Reader has read it. And if Sluggish Reader can read it, so can you. So I am going to move on to the shortest book that I read this year. This was the longest book that I read, by the way, and the shortest one is next, and it's called Last Caution, and it was written by Eileen Chang. And this book was a translated fiction. It was originally written in Chinese, and it was translated into English by Julia Lovell. And and this book is a kind of like a historical spy thriller novel, or rather a novella. So the story takes place sometime in the 1930s, I think, and it takes place in Shanghai. So we have this main character called Chia-chih. She is actually part of a spy ring consisting of young people from University of Hong Kong, and this spy ring sort of represents the cause of the Kuomintang. And what they want to do is that they are targeting this particular powerful political figure called Mr. Yi, who works under the government of Wang Qingwei. And that government is sort of like a puppet government for the Japanese in China at the time. And so the Kuomintang is obviously not cool about that. And so what they want to do is that they want to set up a honey trap for Mr. Yi. And in doing so, they assign Chia-chih to become the seductress in order to lure Mr. Yi so that they can assassinate him. And so, of course, Chia-chih just sort of dress up, and she goes to see Mr. Yi, and she seduces him, and then suddenly, she realizes that she falls in love with Mr. Yi. So the story takes off from there, and I would say that this novella is a tragic story, but at the same time I didn't really enjoy it very much because I would say it's because it's a little too short, and because of its length, I'm not exactly sure what are the things that I should focus on. Like, how should I tether myself to this book? Because usually I would tether myself to the characters or the plot. Now this book has a plot, but it feels like a really short plot. It's just a short story. I mean, it's not that, it's not that, the plot is not like a roller coaster. It's just like a really straightforward plot. It's not that super interesting. So how about the characters? Well, the characters don't really work for me either, because I realized that I didn't know much about Mr. Yi. I didn't know much about Chia-chih, and I wasn't really clear on their personal motivation, their personal fears and beliefs and all that, their goals. I mean, I kind of know their goals, but I don't know what drives them, or at least I'm not really sure of what drives them, and as a result I'm not attached to these characters, and all of the things that they do later in their story just, it just did not affect me. I didn't care so much about what happened to them, and so as a result this story feels kind of lukewarm to me. It didn't really work. But if you are still interested in this story, feel free to do so. If you've read the story, let me know if you like it. What are the things that you like about this book, and how what are the aspects that one could focus on this book? I think that would be really interesting to know as well. So I am going to continue with the final book that I finished in December, and this is The Good Son by Chang You-jeong. So this book was originally written in Korean, and it was translated into English by Chi-young Kim. And this book is a murder mystery thriller. But okay, first of all, I must say that I'm not like the most kind of like a familiar reader when it comes to thrillers. I don't read a lot of whodunit books. But this book is not exactly a whodunit, because we know who did it. This book is mostly about why, the motivation behind the killing. So basically a killing happened in this book. We have this character called Yu-jin, and he's a young man, living in Incheon, Korea. And he lives with his mom and also kind of like his best friend, who lives together with them after his grandfather died. So one day, or rather one evening, Yu-jin comes home very late at night, and his mom is like so worried about him. And then after that, Yu-jin sleeps. And when he wakes up, he finds out that his mom is lying on the ground in the kitchen in a pool of blood, dead. And it appears that Yu-jin is the person who has killed the mom, but somehow Yu-jin just does not have the memory of what happens in the previous night. His memory is really spotty, and so yeah, he's amnesiac and he doesn't know what is going on. And as we read this book, we sort of see how he slowly gains those memories back on what exactly happens the night before. So it sort of seems clear that Yu-jin is the killer in this book, but what we don't know, and what is the spoilery part, is why Yu-jin kills the mom. And I think that is kind of interesting way of that is a really interesting direction of the plot, I think. One thing that I kind of like about this book is that, I personally would say that Yu-jin is a character with barely any redemptive qualities, but somehow as I read the story, I am kind of rooting for him, and I'm really curious to not only wanting to find out why he kills his mom, but also if what will happen to him later in this book. Somehow I sympathize with him, and I want him to to triumph somewhat in this book. So that's really interesting. But one thing that I find to be kind of it's not the worst thing that could ever happen in a book, but I feel that this book also talks a little bit about mental health. And upon finishing this book, I realizes that the motivation behind the killing apparently is not exactly very deep. That's what I think. I don't think the motivation is really deep. I was expecting some kind of a theme in which the book talks about a certain kind of darkness that is present in all of us, and so when we read this book, we sort of realize that, oh my gosh, everyone is capable of darkness, sort of a thing. But that didn't really happen with this book. In fact, the motivation, I feel, is very surface level, and I wasn't really satisfied by the explanation on why Yu-jin kills his mom. So let me know if you have read this book. This is kind of like one of the few thrillers I've read lately, and I am actually quite excited to read more. I think this is probably like one of those moments I actually crossed over my comfort zone and tried something new. So that was great. And this book was my final book of 2021. And with that, I am going to end this wrap up. And I'll see you again in a different video. What else I'll be talking about next, I don't know. I'll plan those soon. But anyway, I hope you'll have a lovely day, and I'll see you around. Take care. Thanks for watching, and bye bye.